Thanks for joining. Today with us, we have Chris Warsow, a lifetime food scientist who started his career in the back of a restaurant and now works with some of the country's largest food producers, flavor masters, and chefs. Today, he shares a ton of knowledge with us about how the food industry really works, GMOs, and some really specific stuff about how animals are harvested and food brands are protected.
Oh, come on. We're not. There's no judgment here, Chris.
All right, let me go grab another one real quick. Hold on a second.
That's a great plan.
Get warmed up.
What's up, buddy?
Might as well get myself one too. Yeah, you normally do this to me nice and early, so I don't feel right having a drink.
One of the finer things in life right there.
It really is. I mean, it's stood the test of time, and every time I drink one, it's either nostalgic or it's refreshing. If not both of those things.
What do you got?
Bush latte.
Oh, I know, right? It ain't broke. Don't hate on
No, it
Bush,
ain't broke.
right?
Don't fix it.
Any day.
Any day of the week.
Favorite domestic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I in my old age, I've had to start to transition to the alcoholic seltzer waters.
Oh, wow.
Oh, boy. I'm sorry.
It's a gluten thing.
Gluten thing. All right. Well,
Don't worry, Chris.
It's acceptable.
You're gonna hear a lot of things about Ryan that, he's got other strengths.
It makes me poop.
yep. Well, that keeps you regular, though.
It does. It does. I live in like a 90210 style community here in Atlanta. And so in the middle of our like courtyard thing is this pool, right? And so that's where everybody chills and all these things. 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. session on a normal Saturday. It gets pretty hot here. You got to stay hydrated, right? And so I started getting these like kind of bad hangovers. And one of the people, along with one of my buddies at home in Michigan, kind of suggested like, hey, man, why don't you drink different things? And so once I got over the like supposed less manliness of White Claw.
All right. So you're still crushing 10 White Claws and you don't get a hangover? Like, isn't it? It's,
I still get the hangover, but I don't have the gastrointestinal things.
That's why I went to the Bush latte, because the Miller Lite was giving me the head thing. So I transitioned to the Bush latte about 6 months ago.
I don't mind a heavier beer. I like the way they go down, but man, a night of IPAs makes you feel a lot different. Makes you feel a lot different the next day than just. And yeah, I'm in it for more than one. So I mean,
right on.
I'm kind of glad the IPA situation is sunsetting a little bit.
Yeah, they put the kibosh on that, like the 120-minute Dogfish Head IPA. It was undrinkable. You can't do it. So.
What, I don't know that one in particular. What are they, just as high IBUs as possible, or what do you mean? Like,
well, as high as you can go. 120-minute Dogfish Head IPA.
So how high was the IBUs on that?
It was like 60 or 70. It was nuts. Yeah, you can't drink it.
And I know it's not directly correlated, but the alcohol content goes up when they're that high too,
Not
right?
Not necessarily. You can have it's just a matter of how many hops you stick in it. So that's usually the thing. So they add hops 3 times throughout the brewing process, and the level of hoppiness to it it's unbearable. But I'm glad that's like when we started drinking IPAs, the highest one, the IPA of choice was Sierra Nevada. It was drinkable. It was balanced with malt and the alcohol and the hops. Everything was balanced. And then something happened along the way, and the California-style IPAs went nuts, and they're undrinkable. You can't do it. I can't do it anymore. So, Chris,
and I'm being, because I just expect you to be a little bit smarter about this than us. But so like the Sierra Nevada, the kind of the old school, the IPAs that our dad drank, right? What are the IBUs on that?
I think that's like 17 or 18 IBUs on a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale
versus 60 something in that other one. Yeah, like I don't.
No, not so good.
Once they started in bars, it'd be like, alcohol by volume, and then what is it? International bitterness units? Is that what IBU stands?
Yeah.
it took me a couple years to even understand, like, what are they? Oh shit. They're saying what the hoppiest one is.
Right.
And like, if it's on the list, I don't want it. I don't want the hoppiest one. I'm not here for that.
That's thankfully that's going away now, which I'm happy about.
Well, aren't they also kind of like the easiest ones to make?
Well, the hops cover up a lot of the mistakes in the brewing process. So if you put enough, it's like putting vanilla extract in something. It can be terrible, but if you dump a bunch of vanilla extract in it, you can drink it. So
tastes like vanilla.
Yeah.
Is this why everybody and their brother has an IPA in small batch or?
Exactly.
That was a nice little introduction to our friend who knows much more scientifically about food and alcohol than we do.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's my doctor calls it an occupational hazard.
Ryan, why don't you introduce our guest today?
I think I could do that. So our guest today is Chris Warsow, longtime friend, conventioNOT for our listeners who are here time and again, have experienced a decent amount of Michigan State grads over the couple interview seasons, but we spent some time living together. Hopefully we were much wilder. I don't know that we drank any less.
No.
But maybe we'll edit that part out. But ultimately, like the reason that I wanted to invite Chris on the show is because I've watched your career a little bit from afar, and then we catch up every few years here and there. But it's one of the more exciting careers from the food perspective. So I won't tell the story of that. I'd like you to, tell us a little bit about yourself as far as a career goes. The show, as most of our listeners know, or for anybody new who's joining us today, is about people who are achieving unconventional types of success. So there's plenty of like stories out there about celebrities who do these amazing things and they started filming themselves on YouTube and all those things. But most of us aspire to have a lifelong career in something that's really cool. Mm-hmm. And so when we invite guests on the show, like yourself, we try to identify people that are either on our Rolodex or identified by our friends to us who are doing something cool and have a way better, story to tell. Mm-hmm. And then the thing that it always comes out of each episode, it has a lot to do with about like how you keep a big long-term career going and how you kind of stay happy. I know a lot of that's wilderness for you and what you get to experience in your life and your travels. So again, I'm probably a little bit long-winded, but I'd like to turn it over to you and, introduce yourself and tell us who you are. And we'll talk about all the stuff, man.
Sure. My name is Chris Warsow. I'm actually a corporate executive chef for a flavor house, which probably people don't know what that is, but I make things taste good. So when it says natural flavor on the back of something, that's what I do. But I started out wanting to be a chef when I was younger, and I wanted to do this since I was 12 or 13 years old. I had my first job when I was 13, working in a little bar down the street from my house, and started washing dishes, and kind of realized I can get paid to cook and have fun, which is kind of interesting to me because I stuck with it and something I want to do. And I was going out exploring like what's a kumquat when I was 14 years old. It's hard to find a 14-year-old nowadays that knows what a kumquat is. So these are the things that enthralled me when I was a kid. And I knew I wanted to cook from a very young age. And so I went to culinary school, and I worked in restaurants for a good portion of my formative years, from the time I was 13 till all the way through college. I worked in a restaurant of some capacity, and I did just about everything in a restaurant. Everything from dishwasher. I was a host. I was a bartender. I was a cook. I ran 2 restaurants by the time I was 19, 20 years old. But then something sparked my interest, and I kind of realized that working in a restaurant is probably not a very good career for your body, or your mental stability. So I kind of went back to school and realized that there's this whole thing called food science, and that's how I ended up at Michigan State, meeting you guys. I actually, the cool story was how I found out about food science, and that's how I got into the, making flavors and, using flavors for a living, is the story of the Caesar salad dressing that always broke. So I learned this story of food science is, this restaurant, maybe Nico's Cafe back in the day on King Road and 4th Street. I worked there for a while, and we couldn't figure out why the Caesar salad dressing was breaking. So everyone's chilling everything, putting everything in the freezer and freezing it, and keeping everything really cold. And I went to the library and realized that the phospholipids in egg yolks work better at room temperature. So we were going about everything wrong, and that's when I kind of realized, there's a career path. If you love cooking and you love science, there's this thing called food science out there, and the story kind of wrote itself after that.
That was the coolest intro I think we've ever had on the show.
For sure.
Thank you.
I'm sincere. I loved food. I grew up in a household, where I was real spoiled from a culinary aspect, but I had no appreciation of this other avenue that you're describing. So the whole idea that you kind of recognize the hazards that are inherent to the restaurant industry.
I learned that from a young age.
Bro, you realize that at a young age when most people are loving those hazards, right? Like that's not all it's about, but that is part of that industry, right? And I'm sure you experienced some of it and probably just said, I can't keep this up for the next 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and that's what I say to people. Like, I want to get into cooking. And, I have very, people in their younger years, they come up to me and say, hey, I want to be a chef. I said, well, that's not a career. That's actually a lifestyle. So you got to be prepared for that, because if you want 2.5 kids in a house in the suburbs, this is not the career path you want to go down, because you're working holidays, you're working weekends, your family's not going to see you. So I think there's a lot of people out there that are in the restaurant industry that kind of realize this at a little too late of a stage, but there's people out there that are driven and love it. So I made a different career choice, and I took a different path on it, and it's better for your mental health. Let's put it that way. From what I've seen in the restaurant industry.
Did you know when you were that young? I mean, was it that profound?
I knew by about 22, 23, 24 that I enjoy cooking, I enjoy food, but there has to be a better way to do this.
Than to climb the ladder in the back of a restaurant.
Yes, I climbed the whole ladder in the restaurant, and then when I got near the top, I'm like, well, there's one more step to this. And I saw the corporate, the chefs that I worked for, the head chefs, and they sat in an office, and they didn't go do any cooking anymore. They sat there with a clipboard, and they ordered things, and they come out and make the special or the sauces in the morning, and that's all they had. And they were there for the next 12 hours on the expo line, picking orders out and sending food out in the dining room. And I knew maybe there's something else to this cooking thing that I could do.
Hey, it's Ryan. Thanks for listening today. I'm curious, when we showed up before you started the episode, did we show up automatically in your feed because you've subscribed to us? Or are you still one of those people who's out there and we show up randomly on your podcast channel? What I want to ask you to do is to take a second, pause the episode, jump out and hit that subscribe button. It's helpful. We're everywhere. YouTube, iTunes, all the tunes, anywhere you might be able to search us. Find us where you listen and subscribe. We appreciate it.
There's a big movement, right? Like when I was a kid, people didn't all want to grow up and be chefs, right? But now it's all over TV.
It's celebrity.
It is. It's a different. There's a different attraction to it now. Yeah. You don't belong in a kitchen. You're well educated and not fully tatted.
Yeah, I don't have any sleeves.
Yeah, but that's all you'll need. That's all you need, and then you could be a chef.
Yeah, back then there was no celebrity. Actually, there's when I was 21, 20 years old, 2 years old, you went into a bar or a restaurant, or, hanging out at the bar, and you're trying to pick up a chick, and you say you're a cook, and they're like, why don't you go find a real job?
Yeah.
Nowadays, like, oh, you're a chef. Oh, that's cool. Let's talk about that. Back then, it was like, you're a dirtbag.
Yeah. No, it was a job.
It's interesting. Mm-hmm. Celebrity chefs kind of came around.
Right.
They were the other byproduct of 24-hour TV. So there's this whole thing about news that came around with the 24-hour TV, but then the Food Network came around, right? And then all of a sudden you started to see collaboration, not only between like these chefs with like books they would publish, and of course it was 24-hour TV with like that core group, it blossomed out into like a multimedia situation. So I remember like Tyler Florence early on did a combo with Applebee's, right?
Okay.
And so that's the time where, I mean, we weren't exactly like the demographic of those people, but we were coming of age as they were starting to like be on every show. Gosh, I guess a lot of those people have parlayed that into more like full store brands today. Like I think Rachel Ray is somebody who's maybe like in that category. She's moved around into
she's making dog food, so she's full spectrum now. I mean, she's all over the place.
Not even just humans anymore. Yeah,
she was a waitress. She started being a waitress. I mean, she was never a cook or a chef. That was her claim to fame. She started as a waitress, and then she had the personality and ended up being on TV and getting the show and saying EVOO, and now EVOO is ubiquitous now. So it's a great story. I mean,
it's true.
Very fortuitous. I mean, she did awesome for herself. I mean, I can't. People want to poo-poo her. I'm looking at that like, man, that's freaking awesome. If you could parlay, your love of food into a television show and having your stuff at Target and having dog food and everything else with your name on your picture on it. I mean, you made it.
But I'm sure there are a lot of guys who are sitting at your table who are the academics of the culinary world, right? So there isn't that shared, like, good for them. It's they don't deserve that. And here we've been studying all these years, and I know you're not that guy, Chris, but I feel like must be a subset of you guys, right? That are the real scientists that like, and I'm not trying to trivialize. I know chefs are trained and they go to, university specific for that. But like, you're talking about like molecular makeup of stuff and some things that aren't really normal. There aren't a lot of TV shows on about that, right? Like, it's not easy to.
Well, the guy that touched on it, I think the guy that started the whole food science drive, in cooking is, Alton Brown.
He was the Iron Chef, like MC guy, right? That's
back then he had his show called Good Eats. I mean, he taught you, what the Maillard reaction was, when you're browning something. So he kind of kicked the whole thing off, and then people started saying like, hey, cooking is chemistry. And what I do now, I mean, I have a minor in organic chemistry, and now I use that every day. People say, I'd never use organic chemistry. I use it every day in my life. Knowing what a dimer of lysine is, and what the Maillard reactions, what Amadori complexes are. So I use that every day in my life to figure out what makes food taste good.
That's the moment when food has to become scalable.
Yes.
Everything we talked about up to this point in time, right? We talk about save the beer conversation because that also is scalable, especially with places like Dogfish Head who are, acquired by Ambev or these types of things. But like ultimately, there's this point where there's a single pan piece of food that meets, we're going to make thousands and thousands upon units that are going to be shipped either into a household in which we want to maintain a flavor consistency or into restaurants in which we're going to have and here we go again, kind of like, talking about the ladder of different variable level of chefs. You're going to have to be able to serve something up that I assume at the very basic level, the first day fry cook is going to be able to maintain consistency that you have in your development lab, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing right now is probably sous vide. If everyone's heard of sous vide before, literally translated, it's under pressure. So when you vacuum package something and then cook it in a medium like water, you're using a very specific time for a very specific temperature to obtain a very specific result. So by cooking like an ossobuco veal shank in sous vide, you're coming out with a very tender product every single time. So instead of that cook or that chef in the back of the house at the restaurant having to braise those ossobuco veal shanks in the oven for 12 hours, you can buy that veal shank now that has the same eating qualities as you'd have if you cooked in the back of the house for 12 hours. And that's where food science lays. Because, a lot of those browning products that you get from searing that veal shank off are not going to be developed, when you do sous vide cooking. So it takes a flavor or something to add a seasoning to the package to give the impression that it's been roasted in the oven. And that's kind of where, my background comes in to figure out how to make that thing taste like it's been cooked in the back of the house, and then that translates to ease and convenience to the restaurant owner as well, because now they have a consistent product day to day, month to month, week to week, and it takes very little skill to basically retherm that and serve it to the customer.
That's what I feel like the ultimate goal of a flavor house is to make everything idiot proof, right? Like you can't fuck this up. Our flavor is going to come through no matter who cooks it, right? Like I'm just like oversimplifying it, but it's consistency. And that going back, Ryan, to what you said about scalability, that's when you got to start being real scientific and real objective about like, no, man, this isn't a spoonful here and a spoonful there. Like that may work in your mom and pop, but when you're sending that around the world to a variety of situations, environments, skill sets, and you want to reproduce the same product because that product's got your name on it, right?
Well, we're a supplier that goes into it. So we partner with the big meat manufacturers, the big meat producers. So we partner with them to give them a flavor that will give the impression that it was cooked at home. And we're using the same process, the same chemical process that when you sear something, we're doing the same process. We're just doing it in a very controlled manner where you can add it to the food product and it gives you that same flavor and taste and reproducibility every single time.
So where does that start for you today? I mean, I'm sure after, working a career, you've grown, but like, do you still spend a lot of time in the lab tasting things or,
Absolutely.
how does it work as a food scientist affecting that type of business?
So my team that I have at work, we have food scientists, we have chefs, we have delivery systems people that kind of take the flavor and wrap it up in a nice little package so the company can use it that's buying our flavors. So, like example today, my day today was tasting cheese analog. So we have a customer in and they want to make cheese that is non-dairy. So we sat there and worked with their base, and it's made out of actually potato starch. And the nice thing about potato starch is potato protein has a very extensibility property just like cheese would. So adding flavors to this base makes it taste and act just like American cheese would. So they want to put it on a cheeseburger. So we sat there and tweaked the flavors back and forth all day long, tasting this cheese to make sure it had the eating qualities that you would expect out of real American cheese. So that's what I did all day. And we tasted analog that was made out of crumbles they were made out of potato protein as well. So we're still working on that one. So that was my day today, working with the flavorists, working with my application chefs, and then the customer was in today, and we're just kind of tweaking and tasting and seeing what flavor worked best in their products.
Dude, so this whole meat-free, like it's just been booming for you, right? Like your whole industry has probably just been expanding, and the opportunities have to just be. Again, I'm oversimplifying, but I think about 10 years ago, there was one vegan item,
Right.
and now it's a vegan restaurant. And to me, vegan just means like they don't want the real version. So I had a fucking vegan, a vegan faux like Southern fried chicken sandwich a couple weeks ago. Ryan, you know that spot in Royal Oak, Ale Mary's?
Yeah, I've been there too.
You've been there too? Dude, I don't know what it was, but it was like one of the best chicken sandwiches I've ever had. I couldn't take another bite though because it just freaked me out. If that's not chicken, what is
Plenty
it?
Plenty of soy.
Yeah. Well,
dude, I don't know
soy and pea and potato, all kinds of proteins nowadays.
The texture, the flavor, it was phenomenal.
And
but
that's something we haven't. You wouldn't even think about doing that 10 years ago.
Is there some dude in the back of their kitchen coming up with that, or they're bringing that in, right?
They're bringing that in.
That's got to be okay.
There's a lot of know-how and protein chemistry that goes into that to basically know how those different proteins interact to give you that texture. I mean, there's extrusion technology in there. There's flavor technology. So there's a lot of different components of science that go into making that analog the way it is. That's not something that dude in the back of the house whipped up.
So you just analog is your description of a faux version of something. It's just not the real version.
It's not the real version, but that's the industry speak.
Vocabulary.
That's the industry speak.
Everything analog.
That's analog.
I like that.
I actually spoke at a conference yesterday on analog and how to flavor analog. So that's
I got a couple analog friends in my life right now.
exactly. I think we all do.
When we're talking about what you're doing and tweaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a team, I'm sure, that's working together. You've got a group of clients in a room who are tasting, and you're giving live feedback. Somebody's going back into the other room and preparing another flavor to come forward within a matter of what, minutes or hours? Is kind of like an all day
they can
thing.
Tweak something. Yeah, they're here all day. So we came in, we did the first iteration that they wanted to see, and they're like, yeah, you know what, this cheese, it's a little too creamy. It has, it's getting like a little cardboard background to it. And the flavor says, you know what, let me go back to my lab. I'm going to make another flavor. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, and then we'll make another iteration of it. We'll whip it up in a vacuum mixer. That's what we do, a heated vacuum mixer to make the cheese. So it gives you the right, texture, and it heats the proteins and it heats the starches that are in there to give it a thickening quality. Then you chill it to make it look like real cheese, and then we taste it and say, yep, that the cardboard note's gone. It's more dairy now, but now it's peaky on the front end. It has too much of that aged cheddar note. So we did like 3 or 4 iterations like that over the course of the day, and they walked home happy today and said, you know what, we have a winning flavor now for our cheese analog, and they're going to go out and sell it.
Whoa.
Okay. Is it too much to ask what the end product will become?
This was actually a cheese product that they're going to sell in QSRs, quick serve restaurants. So it'll be a slice of American cheese that goes on your analog burger.
Okay. So it'll be lactose-free cheeseburger. Lactose-free.
There's no dairy in it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a vegan cheeseburger. Yeah. But that just because it's a quick stop doesn't mean they ain't vegan too. Like that's the part to me that has really gotten insane. It's just you talk about scaling, like.
Well, actually, the products that we're making, those analogs that we're making, those actually aren't targeted to vegans. Those are actually targeted for meat eaters, because vegans don't want anything that tastes like meat. People that are died and true vegans, they want, they're more the Morning Star black bean burger kind of people. The analog that we're making right now, and the products they're making that taste and cut and eat like meat, those are meant to convert meat eaters to non-meat eaters. So it's like a flexitarian kind of thing. So they're substituting 1 or 2 meals out of their week from maybe real meat to an analog or a meat product that's made out of vegetables. So that's the target demographic they're going after.
I get that.
I don't eat a lot of analog, but I guess I'm one of those people, right? Like I don't consciously not eat meat on nights, but there are nights in the week where like we have kind of more of like a vegetable base. I've tried them all, right? Like I've tried the Impossible Burger. I went to get the Impossible Whopper, sausages, all these things. And the only one out of all of them, and again, it freaks me out too, like you, Mike, that I like is there's like, I don't even know the brand, but it's served up. It's $12 for 3 sausages. And it's like some sort of like soy plus soy plus soy plus analog ingredients.
At the grocery store, though.
Yeah. Grocery store, that's a retail product. Yeah. Probably like a Beyond Meat or something like that.
Beyond Meat's a real popular brand. Yeah, I know my brother likes that one.
It eats well.
We jumped into the science, and I can't help it. I would spend all day there, but I'm curious. You mentioned earlier, about your love affair started at a young age. And like, what did that come from in-house? Like, were your folks? Where are you from originally?
I'm actually from Wyandotte, so Wyandotte, Michigan. Yeah,
Downriver.
Yeah, Downriver strong.
Allen Park, Wyandotte.
Sure.
I love it.
Yeah, I spent a good portion of my time growing up on Groseal, but a lot of my cooking was out of necessity, I guess. My grandmother, my dad's mother, could cook great.
Okay.
My mom's grandmother could bake great, but she was Irish and she couldn't, God rest her soul, she couldn't cook for shit. So, but she could bake. So my mom, she couldn't cook. My dad knew how to cook a little bit, but I don't know what happened to me. I was the guy that liked food. So, when I was my 13th birthday, my my parents took me to Jimmy Schmidt's Rattlesnake Club. I thought that was the best birthday present in my entire life. So having a nice gourmet meal for lunch, that was my reward when I was a kid. So I got into food and I started enjoying food from a pretty early age. So I don't know where it actually stemmed from. It might have been out of necessity than anything else. So
no, I get that. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that it didn't ruin you.
No, it didn't ruin me.
Rattlesnake Club's still there?
No, Jimmy Schmidt's still kicking. He's still around, but the Rattlesnake Club's not open anymore. It used to be in the lower level of the old Stroh's Brewery back in the late 80s. I guess it would be mid to late 80s. And I actually had, I don't know, they're around here somewhere. I think they're in my closet right now. I had trading cards of Detroit chefs. So you had Milo Shahelka. I had Jimmy Schmidt. So you had, all the big chefs in Detroit.
Man.
That I lived and breathed it when I was a kid. It was like, kids get obsessed with basketball players or baseball players. For some reason, in my teenage years, I was obsessed with chefs. So I don't know where it came from, but that was.
I hate to point this out, but that didn't make you any friends, right? Like there was no other kids to talk to. I mean, if I knew a kid in middle school that was reading about, European chefs, he would have probably been sitting alone at the lunch table,
Exactly.
like that was just a level of study of something that wasn't super cool. So I really it didn't make you any friends.
You ain't gonna make no friends. Yeah, it's a little different nowadays. And I look back and I used to read my mother's, my mother's a nurse, and I used to read my mother's medical books when I was a kid. So my love of science and my love of cooking kind of came together in what I'm doing right now. So
you married
it was like kind of a natural marriage, in my opinion.
So would your parents, first, are your parents, were they foodies? I mean, that term wasn't even around then. And secondarily, they had to at least indulge you on your birthday, but would they indulge you throughout the year to take you to a place that you had found some way, not through the internet, right? Yeah. I mean, this takes research at that point in time. Now you pick up your phone and you think, oh, I'm going to check this out.
Yeah, but young Chris was looking at the biggest ad in the yellow pages because they must have had something going on. Like when you went to those restaurants, did you pick them out and not your parents?
Well, we loved eating at, we used to go down to Mexican Town and go to Xochimilco's. I mean, that was a cool treat. We used to go to Dearborn and go to Lashish and eat shish kebab and shish tawuk and hummus. And, your average kid didn't do that kind of stuff. So
I did. But I was just talking to someone the other day about I didn't think it was weird to eat sushi when I was little, but again, in hindsight, my parents weren't that normal. So I'm lucky. I'm grateful that they weren't that normal. But until you have your buddy over, right? And he's like, why would you go to Detroit in Mexican Town?
Exactly. Southwest Detroit. Back then, it's a little different.
Yeah, back then it was quite different.
So that's kind of where that came from.
Chris, then so you're working in restaurants, high school, I'm sure you probably always did fine in school. You went right into your undergrad. Where'd you go for your undergrad?
I actually went to Schoolcraft College in Livonia, Michigan for my associates in culinary arts. So I did that first.
Okay.
And that's where I got the love of food. And then when I went to Michigan State, I got my undergrad and master's degree from Michigan State. So I was a pain in the ass to a lot of my professors at Michigan State because I knew cooking. I knew why something, I saw things brown, and I knew when you made a roux, you had to brown the flour, but I want to know the chemistry behind it. So, I'm calling it my, my food chemistry teachers, but why do we brown something? Why do we disperse the butter and the roux, and how do we brown the flour? What reaction is taking place there? He's like, I don't know, man. It's just just do it. Just shut up. But I had that mentality, why does this happen? Why does this work? And that drove me through my undergrad. I wanted to know when I was working in a restaurant why these things actually happen. I had a love of cooking. There was another guy that was in my program as well, named Samir, and he came from the same background as me. He was a chef before he started food science. So we both had this he's actually a professor at Polytech right now, Samir Amin. He had the same love of food I did, so we would cook for the food science club because up until this point, the food science club, they'd order a freaking pizza from Domino's for their meetings, and we got a bunch of people that are supposed to love food, that appreciate food, and are going to be cooking, and creating food products for the country basically, and they have zero interest in making food or making things taste good. So Samir and I actually came up with this program. We're like, hey, let's get together for the Food Science Club meeting, and we're going to cook the meal for the Food Science Club meeting. So we put up the posters and said, come on out and learn how to cook. Frickin' crickets. Nobody showed up at all. And we were giving out free cooking classes, and these kids had zero interest in it whatsoever. But now you have the Research Chefs Association, and now they're teaching these food scientists on the backside, teaching them how to cook, because they have no idea, they have no appreciation for food. But they're like, hey, maybe this might be important in my career. If I'm creating food products, maybe I should understand, what the heck's going on in a food product to make it taste good.
Michigan State wasn't real well known for their food or culinary programs, right?
Well, it's not culinary, but not culinary, no. But food science, they're one of the top in the nation.
Really? Okay. See, I didn't know that.
Relative to lactose things, right? Isn't there something?
Not everything is related to cows, McDivitt, just because it's Michigan State.
Actually, the food science program is actually part of the School of Ag. So yes, it is part of the cow calendar.
It is. It's because it's the only reason Michigan State is there is because of the cows.
I did not research that before the show, but I do remember, and I think that the movie Napoleon Dynamite came out after college. I do remember that I had known a dairy tester at some point in my life, like a dairy taste tester, quite literally.
I took dairy judging. It was extracurricular. It was the dairy judging club. So we actually
people think that's bullshit.
I'm not even kidding you. So we traveled around the country tasting 6 different dairy products. You had to taste cheddar cheese, cottage cheese.
This one got into a patch of onions.
Yeah. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And you'd be there at 7 o'clock in the morning tasting with 300 other kids, chewing up cheddar cheese, looking for defects and spitting into a barrel at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I was there. I did it. So,
how much of food science study is palate development?
Not much, unfortunately. So the dairy judging team was probably the sliver of actually having to taste something and actually vocate it, vocalize what you're tasting. Which is a big part of what I do every day of my life. You have to, people say, tasting wine, I got hints of, cherries and leather and, tobacco in this wine.
Yeah.
We do that in a more, I guess, rudimentary manner. How does it taste good? So this cheese flavor, you have a descriptor wheel and you kind of pick out, what you're tasting and maybe some defects that you have in it as well. But that's probably the only descriptive analysis that you really do in college if you do the extracurriculars, because that's not part of a normal food science curriculum.
Yeah, you're going to get by without those skills.
Right. If it looks good and it has the eating properties and it's safe to eat, good to go.
You pass.
But that's basically where I got into my career, because my career didn't exist when I started college. And that's what they say nowadays. Kids that start high school, by the time they get out of college, their careers don't exist yet either. So I was kind of fortuitous that I kind of fell into this, and because this job didn't exist really, because now chefs are kind of like the guardian of the brands at a lot of companies as well. When the endless pursuit of profit comes into play, because companies are always trying to cost reduce their product to make more profit. But it comes to a point where that food product, you've taken so much cost out of it, it's now inedible. If you eat an Oreo cookie now, it's completely different than what it was 20 years ago, just because they pulled so much cost out of it that it's inedible. Yeah, it's incremental change. It's incremental change.
Right now, Pepsi is figuring out a way to save more money next year.
Every day. Every food company is trying to pull cost out of something. It still looks the same, but it's incremental change all the way down the line. So we're going to take this one ingredient out and switch it out for this one. In that taste test between this version and that version, they made this one change. Yes, it's not noticeable. But 5 changes down the road, you take what you started with, and 15 years later, you're tasting it. Those things don't even come close to
if you haven't had one in 20 years, you're going to notice a difference.
Pick it up and go, this tastes nothing like what I remember it.
But the customer they make money off of isn't going to know the difference, right? Because they're changing with the flavor,
right?
So
and that's the good food companies. They have a brand ambassador. They have someone that protects the brand, and they have to stand up and say, no, we're not going to make this change because it's going to affect the quality of it. You can see Kraft Heinz right now. They're going through, the change going on there is just crazy. When Buffett got involved with that, and it's nuts how a lot of those food companies kind of lost focus from food, and they're trying to refocus on the food and the brand, because they tried to pull so much cost out of things that it hurt their bottom line.
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually, the chickens come home to roost eventually, because people stop buying the product, and now they're trying to reverse that process right now to basically have more creativity and and make the brand what it was once in the day.
A lot harder to get that trust back after you've lost it, though, right? Like,
you got that right.
Good luck.
You got that right.
I never thought about something like, I didn't know like Buffett, anything like that. But what I'm gathering is that dude with a ton of money became part of Heinz.
Yeah, it was a kind of a strange bedfellowship there. There's a group of Brazilians that went halvesies with Warren Buffett, and because Buffett wants iconic brands, so he wants Coke's his ultimate goal one day. But Kraft Heinz, Heinz was one of his brands that he wanted, and it didn't work out well. Let's put it that way. And I think he made kind of a mistake in that one, because they're struggling right now.
Did Kraft completely sell itself to Buffett and these Brazilians?
Yep. So that's
really?
how it became Kraft Heinz. So it's
so how long ago did that happen?
That was probably 4 or 5 years ago that Kraft Heinz merger went down.
Huge Berkshire deal.
You, as a scientist, that business transaction is going to immediately start affecting guys that do what you do there, right? Like right away, their job just got more important. Like, all right, how are we saving money? Buffett just showed up. It's not about it tasting like old 57. Now we got to make it. Okay.
Yeah, is
food science a small community?
Trust me, it's a very small community. That's why you never want to piss anybody off, because you never know who's going to be your boss next, or who's going to be working for you. So it's a pretty small world.
There's got to be a lot of close to the heart secrets, right? I mean, we're talking about that's full on tech.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's NDAs that fly around. I mean, there's NDAs, like everything that we did today is covered by an NDA. So you can't say, who's working on what, and so it's very closely guarded secrets, because the competition's so stiff right now, especially in the analog world.
Do you ever wonder why Mike and I spend all these hours talking to people? Well, mostly it's because we're curious. Secondarily, it's because we like to share the stories of people as we learn how to become better journalists. In order to help us out, we would love if you take a second and give us some feedback on your podcast channel. Just pause the episode, go and write us a review. Give us as many stars as you want. We'll love to read it.
And just tell me, I don't want to talk about that if you don't want to, but I never cared about GMOs until I moved to Hawaii. And to be honest, I don't really care about them that much now, but everyone's always so upset about them that I can't help but notice the noise.
But everything's a GMO.
Corn and soybeans. But the thing is, I'll tell you a good story about GMOs, is you're not going to feed the world's population without GMOs. I'll tell you that right now.
Exactly.
Everyone wants to eat their, organic
everything.
Your organic vegetables. Well, organic vegetables, it takes 5 times the amount of water and about 2 or 3 times the amount of herbicides to grow that same tomato. And you know where they grow all these tomatoes? In California. So what's in a short supply in California?
Water.
So it behooves people that want to eat organic, non-GMO, because the GMO corn uses so much less water, is drought resistant, pest resistant. So why would you not want to do this? This is the only way that you're going to feed the world's population. I mean, if there's a first world problem in the world right now, it's people putting that butterfly on the front of their packages that said non-GMO certified. I mean,
is it akin to like the anti-vaxxers a little bit? I mean, it's almost like a similar story, right?
It's probably not as deadly as an anti-vaxxer, but I think it's on par with one of them, because you, on one side of your mouth, say, I care about the environment, but the other side of their mouth, like, I want traditionally farmed corn that uses up 5 times the amount of water as the non-GMO stuff. So there's a dichotomy there, and a lot of people don't grasp. They don't grasp that.
one of the reasons why I think it's such an elevated concern in Hawaii isn't so much the use of GMOs. It's that, and I should know this better than I do, but the amount of land that Monsanto owns here and the GMO testing they do here relative to like, it's a small island and we're surrounded by water. So what are we doing with this stuff that we don't know what it does, putting it into the soil? It's going to leak into the water. So like the environmental concerns about GMOs in Hawaii are unique. I think they're at least somewhat unique.
But what's going to leak into the water? I mean, it's a...
You're talking about pesticides?
Herbicides, pesticides, all of this stuff they're spraying on these plants. I think people in Nebraska care a little less because they're not looking at the guy spraying and looking at the ocean and just being like,
I had a major client there, and they don't give a fuck about GMOs. They are producing most of what we're eating, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
a
like
lot
when
of
it comes
corn.
down, and cows too, for sure. In the Sandhills area. Shout out Nebraska. I like that place.
I'm a trained food scientist, and this is what I do for a living. And I love eating, and I love food. You know what? GMOs are going to save us from ourselves. I'll tell you that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And people that come on rail against them, I don't understand.
I worked in an orthopedic biomechanics lab. So that means we did impact testing, and you don't always get cadavers. So that is animal testing.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be times where that would somehow come up. The ethical conversations I would have to get into with girls and guys that didn't understand the difference between like L'Oreal putting hairspray on a rabbit and putting it in the microwave versus like impact testing on the patellas of a rabbit because it's similar to a human knee joint. Like,
sure,
we need this stuff. There's sorry, but we are such good consumers that if someone doesn't do the dirty work to continue to provide what we like to consume, I mean, I'll listen to people and everyone can have their, but like, don't start getting aggressive with me about beating up on animals. Like, I love animals more than you do. There's a pecking order, man.
Are you familiar with Temple Grandin? You ever hear that name before?
No.
Temple Grandin she's autistic, and she's probably one of the foremost, animal rights activists that are out there.
Okay.
She basically guided the way for humane slaughter of animals.
Okay.
So she developed the methods and techniques to calm the animals before they're culled or harvested, because it's better for the animal, and their well-being, but it's also better for the meat that's harvested, because when you put an animal under stress, you get a lot of lactic acid built up in the muscles.
Yep.
And what happens when you then cull that pig, the pH is imbalanced. You get PSE meat, pale, soft, and exudated meat, and it's very poor quality meat to make sausage or even eating quality. So she developed the methodology that keeps the animals calm, with the blue lights and the misters and things like that, so the animals have a very calm and relaxed, way to being harvested. So there is method to that madness, because you want to treat the animal humanely, because it's gonna give you a better product at the end. And I don't think there's a better way to show respect to an animal you're about to eat than to treat it humanely. Honor that animal in the way it should be treated before you consume it.
Yeah, like I wonder what fish would taste like if it didn't know it was going to die. But instead, I wrestle with it for a half an hour. It knows I'm going to win that fucking fight.
Exactly.
Not always.
And I mean, I get most of the time. No, I'm just kidding. I learned when I moved here, but just like from fishermen, from anecdotal, like, no, man, don't eat that shit right out of the water. Like, give it a day or so. Like that, the muscle's still tense. It's crunchy. It's hot. Like there's a lot of, but yeah, the way you describe it, I've never heard of Temple Grandin before. And the fact that she's like, that's incredible.
They actually made a movie about her, I think, as well. So you can instead of reading the book, you can download the movie from Netflix, I think.
That's cool. We'll tag it in the show notes. I think that's a standard thing you're supposed to say on a fucking podcast, right? We'll have it in the show notes. We really won't, though, by the way. Just I've never once put anything in the show notes other than some stuff that I write about the art.
It's a goal. It's a goal for the future.
Don't look.
So, Mike, I heard you say that your parents have a place in the UP, just to pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereabouts are they at? Is that Eastern, Western UP?
It's honestly, it's about 40 minutes past the bridge. So
Okay.
if you're, you know where Newberry is?
Absolutely.
They're about 20 minutes off of 75 on 23.
Yeah. I'm in Munising, so I got a place over in Munising.
That's a ways over though, right?
It's about another hour from your place west. You know, there's actually a chef, a very renowned chef, Michelin Star chef, that's packed everything up. She had a restaurant called Elizabeth in Chicago, and she packed it all up, and she decided to open basically a camp bed and breakfast kind of thing not too far from my place. She said, screw the whole chef life, and actually started I guess it's kind of a camp where it's a hunter-gatherer kind of thing. You go out and gather the food, and she cooks you food gathered from her 150 acres. I'm looking at that like, I think she's onto something here, you know?
What's her name?
Ileana Reagan.
Chris, you know as well as I do, for her to do that, she was miserable for 20 years in Chicago, right? Like she saved up that nest egg and basically just bounced.
Well, there was just actually a good article in the Chicago, it was New York Times, was it the week before last, about how she got basically sick of the Yelp people and, you know, people constantly hounding her and trying to keep up these appearances to keep a Michelin star restaurant going. She said, you know, basically fuck it all, and bought a camp in the UP, sight unseen, moved up there with her wife, and opened this awesome place.
That might be your jam.
Is that
exactly.
there's been a couple chefs that like get their star and then fold it up, right? Like that's it. We're done now.
It's a tough lifestyle.
That makes sense to me, man. Like I'm never going to do better than that's the top. And then you got to maintain that. Like, fuck. Yeah, it's the best. It's the best, worst compliment. You know, that's a curse.
So what happens? I'm not going to ask like, you know, about your retirement plan, but you're saying that's kind of a good idea.
Absolutely.
And you know, like one of the things that I think that kind of, you know, we're fortunate in our generation to be able to recognize is that we want to check out early, you know, and that, you know, there's all these finance things, and we'll save all that for some other podcast about things that people don't want to listen to about how you prepare for retirement. But like for you, what is it like? I mean, would you really want to do something like that? Or, I mean,
I'll never stop working. That's just, but I'm thinking about things like, how about a barbecue camp? You know, come up to the UP. I'm going to cook pigs over open fire and, you know, have,
I've got a great friend who has a barbecue camp. I'm part of this like whiskey weekend thing. That's also a culinary experience you might enjoy, but it's called Barbecue Camp with a Q. Okay. And very much so a successful thing. I'm sure he would be happy to talk to you about building a business that way. That'd be cool, man.
I have 4 acres. I got 4 acres up there. I'm going to do something like that.
Do you miss the part though, where like you deal with the public, or do you not miss that?
No, not at all. Actually, I mean, I miss cooking for people. I mean, you know, I'm a pleaser. I mean, all my life I've been a DJ. I've been, you know, cooking all my life. It's something that I love to do, is to please people, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you're always trying to make somebody else happy, and sometimes you're not making yourself happy at the same time. So it's a balancing act a lot of times. So I want to do something that makes me happy all the time, and have something that makes other people happy all the time without that stress of owning a restaurant.
Isn't that more of like an educationally pleasing experience, right? So, I mean, you talk a lot about when you try to figure out what you want to do for love, you know, if you're fortunate enough to get there, if you don't have to grind 9 to 5 until you die, which happens to a lot of us, I would attend a Chris Warsow a barbecue camp for sure. You could just start it as a networking event.
As long as you're bringing the turntables too. I mean, are we going to get down at night or what?
They're right there.
When's the last time you did any DJ work?
I don't do it professionally or out anymore.
Well, not work, but when's the last time you messed around on the tables?
I don't know, maybe a couple months ago. I mean, they don't get as much action as they used to, but I've never sold a record. Cool. I still have probably 3,000 or 4,000 records behind me right now. So I've never sold a record. I've never sold a record in my life.
So I do want to talk more about this then, because that's the reality, man. Like you've obviously been really dedicated to your craft, but I'm looking at you, man, and you don't seem miserable, and you must spend your time doing shit other than just taste an analog. Your outdoor time and your DJ, like, are you disciplined about that the way you are with your work, or do you try to do it when you can? Like, do you force that time or?
I spend a lot of time in the UP now, and just snowmobiling and being outside and snowshoeing and chopping wood. I mean, there's a simple pleasure of going out there and just splitting wood and making a wood pile, and
You love it.
and it helps you. It helps me relax, anyways. Where you just don't have to think about the next step. You don't have to think about what's the client thinking, or how can I make a better flavor to make them happy, or you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about, especially if you're doing 80 miles an hour on a snowmobile, you're not thinking about anything but trying not to die and hit that tree next to you. So it's there's a simple pleasure in that as well. That kind of helps me keep my head straight a lot of times. Yep, I'm going up next weekend with a bunch of buddies, and we're gonna go ride snowmobiles out in the woods.
So where are you based out of right now?
Where I currently live? I live in Northern Illinois.
Actually, I was with one of my colleagues this week, as she lives in Burlington, Wisconsin, right there next to Paddock Lake.
Sure.
And
I just went up there and had some burgers 2 weekends ago. There's a little burger joint in Burlington that we frequent.
Nice.
Nowadays, I mean, I was in Spain and the UK, a couple weeks ago, and I ate a lot of tweezer food. And what I mean by tweezer food, 16 course meal, and you're eating stuff that's the size of a $50 in the middle of a plate. I respect the craft, but it's not something that I can eat on a regular basis. When I came home, I want a burger and go eat have a bush latte at the bar there. That's all I wanted.
A forkful at least.
Yep.
At least a forkful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I respect the artistry and the what's going into it too. I just don't want to go to it.
I mean, you're eating a 16, 18 course meal. It takes 4 hours. I start getting bed sores at that point.
But as far as eating, I'm not one who puts something in his mouth and thinks about how much I enjoy the flavor of it. I'm like, yeah, it's good. And then the next 10 bites happen pretty quickly. And then I'm done eating. And I'm like, okay, what are we doing next? So
if you get a group of chefs together, that's the same way.
That.
If you have a group of chefs sitting there like, hey, let's go sit down to a 4-hour meal, they're like, yeah, no. Let's go have a burger, and a couple beers, and have some tapas or something like that, and just graze for a little bit and shoot the shit. If you want to meet up and have some drinks and go to a cool taco bar and something that has cool entertainment or something like that, live band, we'll do that. But we're not going to get together and sit at a 4.5 hour meal.
I'm not in it for Instagram. Yeah,
I'm not in it. I'm not in it.
So, can I ask you on that note, Chris? You mentioned, you're going up north with 5 buddies. So who is your kind of personal, your not work life? Are you hanging out with work people? Are you hanging out with scientists?
Actually, one of my good buddies that goes snowmobiling with me probably every other weekend now, he's actually retired. He's my age. He did very well in a medical supply company, and he got packaged out and he doesn't have to work anymore.
That's a good plan, right? Get rich when you're young, retire young.
But like I said, I'd probably be dead in a week because I have to have something to do every day.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean it's weird, dude. When you talk about, Chris's barbecue, the thing is you wouldn't be able to not do that in a hyper attentive and productive and eventually successful way. The more people we talk to, on this little show of ours, what I've learned is there's just different forms of addiction. But success requires a version of addiction, and
oh yeah, OCD and addiction. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't know. I know whatever you were doing though, you'd be real good at it. So hopefully you just wouldn't go down the wrong roads.
Exactly. That's kind of my personality. Yeah.
There's no shame in selling firewood. I mean,
no,
as long as you're meeting your daily needs and are well socialized, there's no shame in that.
There's no shame in it. But when you have a brain that likes molecular and biology and organic chemistry, after about a week of fucking selling firewood, you're bored. And that is the real curse. I'm not talking about myself, but that brain of yours, that can create all these things, it's also a cage, so it's the constant challenge between you can't get stuck in there. You can't get stuck in there by yourself, at least.
Do you create elsewhere as a hobby? Like, is there something that you're like messing with off to the side that's like your kind of not creative vice, but like your creative muse, so to speak?
I like building stuff now. So that camp that I bought in the UP, it needed a lot of work. I bought it 2 days before Christmas, 3 years ago, and I remember sitting in my living room. I was sitting at the table at this little camp I bought, and I looked out the window, and if I turned my head right, I could see outside through the side of the window because the gap was so huge between the window and the wall that the breeze was blowing through
in the UP. Like,
in the UP.
yeah, that's not.
So that's when I started like, hey, maybe this place needs a little work. So, some of the stuff that I couldn't do, I hired somebody to do, but a lot of the heavy lifting I did myself to kind of fix this place up, because that's a dream I've always had, is to own a place in the UP, because I've been going there for 20 years. It's something I enjoyed. I mean, even back in college, we go camping. I go to the UP because that was my happy place. So I knew that's something I wanted to do. That's I'm living my dream right now, to have a piece of property in the UP and something I fixed up and on a little lake in the middle of the woods.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Munising, Michigan, the average February temperature I just looked up is probably somewhere. Well, not probably somewhere. It's 21 degrees Fahrenheit.
We've had 12 feet of snow already. So, yeah, we've already lost. I had to shovel the roof for the second time last weekend. So
a unique thing that people do not. Why would you have to do that? Well, the snow gets so high that it starts to come, or it mounts up so much on the roof. Yeah, you got to get that. You got to get that slope.
Makes your house collapse. Your house will collapse.
Oh God, I forgot about shoveling snow until you mentioned that, man.
Before Ryan starts to segue here, this is all editable, all right? Mm-hmm. But I've only known one person in my life that had a moniker of DMT.
You want to get some Joe Rogan shit now?
I hadn't heard. I don't know. Does he talk about it? Like, sorry.
Joe Rogan? That's Joe Rogan's thing.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Mm-hmm. Really? All right. See, I do my best. I don't follow any other podcast because I don't want to know how bad I am at this. But
none? Not one?
I listen when you tell me to listen to him, Ryan, but I don't regularly listen to him. Yeah, that's why I'm so bad at this. I don't need to know what I'm supposed to be doing. Anyways, thanks for pointing that out. When I moved to Hawaii, they had these toads, and they're big, bro. Like, they're fucking huge. And my understanding is it's an Australian cane toad. Yeah. And it got brought over here. Long story short, I became very aware of them because it was like, if your dog gets on a toad, your dog will die. And I was like, what? Like, that can't be. And I talked to a couple vets, and they're like, yeah, we can't stop it. The dog will immediately start to foam and froth and basically fucking starts to lose its shit. And they can't reverse it. It's just a matter of quantity. So if you're big dog, better chance. One time, a baby one hit Whaler's mouth for a second. And within 5 seconds, dude, he was foaming at his mouth. My understanding, and because I looked into it, it's like they're at least relatives, or there's some parallel with what they are excreting and what is referred to as DMT. And I don't know anything about that. But yeah, so I'm just curious if so in college, bro, you're DJ DMT. And Chris, I thought you were smart because that was your I'm serious. That was the first thing I knew about you. And it impressed me because I had to go look up what that was. And I'm like, this dude's on some other shit. Maybe figuratively and literally.
Dimethyltryptamine. I mean, it's actually a neurochemical. It's a neurotransmitter that's actually responsible for lucid dreams. So when you're having a very lucid dream, that's your nervous system releasing DMT. You can also extract it from ayahuasca. When people, grind up ayahuasca and drink that and throw up and vomit and have the, godlike, they see God in the woods. That's DMT.
DMT.
That's DMT.
So DMT is a compound in
ayahuasca.
Is that the only thing in ayahuasca, or is there other stuff?
I'm not sure. There's probably other alkaloids in there, but DMT is the one that's mainly responsible.
It's the major one. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the major one.
Do you know of it being extractable from other things other than ayahuasca?
Yeah, you can actually extract it and actually isolate it, so it's actually smokable a lot of times. So you can, it's equatable to what I understand is like completely out of body experiences. So you'll see you'll be out for like 2 or 3 minutes, but in your mind you've been out a lifetime. Like you had a whole life and another existence, and people see a lot of trolls and jewels and gnomes and things like that. So
I don't even like those fucking commercials, dude. Like, why would I want to do that for a lifetime?
Well, hold on. I think it's something like, okay, so you need like a guide, and it's almost like a religious type thing, and so like
it's not something you smoke at a party with your buddies. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Ideally, that's not how it's done.
No, you don't.
I don't think
it's
so.
not something like you're doing. You're not smoking
right.
DMT at your next kegger.
So 20 years ago, at that time when the rave scene was exploding, right? Like the rave scene
it was so fun.
Dude, it was insane, right? Like I was just explaining.
Was so fun.
I was just talking to my older sister the other day, and I don't even know how it came about, but I was like, yeah, like we used to go to raves. I mean, there was just everyone did. And she was like, Michael, I didn't know you were in that scene. And I'm like,
there was no scene. It wasn't the scene. It was just like normal dudes hanging out. Like that's what we did.
That was Detroit. I mean, that was.
We should pivot. We all have professional careers.
I said we're not recording it. I didn't say that I participated. I was at a concert once and something happened. That's all I know.
I have no idea what
that's
happened.
All I know.
Whatever you did at fucking Dave Matthews, Michael. I don't. Suspect. Really suspect. I went to rap shows and electronic music shows. That's what I went to. And most of the kids, not myself, were doing ecstasy and other, mild drugs. Mild, very mild.
And nobody's smoking crack.
I wasn't going to take the opportunity to talk to DJ DMT about dimethyltryptamine. All right.
No worries.
I knew that was going to be an awful segue. I'm not trying to get nobody fired.
It's a little bit of occupational experimentation and plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability, absolutely.
All right, so let's segue to the end of the show. This might be the most educational episode we've done, but what I really want to do is kind of like throw it over to you, Chris. I know you're not like a major social media diva. You've given that up for maybe some finer times of life. But if I want to find you or I want to connect with you or those types of things, what's the way to do it?
LinkedIn's the best way. Yep. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's usually the best way to do it. I'm not a big Instagram or anything else guy, but you can definitely find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me professionally.
Cool.
Perfect.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on the show. For everybody who's not following the show, whether it be on Insta, which Insta is our thing, probably because it's the easiest, and it kind of pushes out to all the other platforms. It's conventioNOT _podcast for most of them. And we're also on all of the major podcast channels. Pandora has been like the new thing lately, I guess, for podcasts. So yeah, we're fucking doing that. Thanks for coming on. Mike's got his eyes rolling out of his head again. I can see him. And he's eager to get on to his evening because usually it's about like 8 a.m. when Mikey rolls in. So really appreciate everybody. And I guess we're out of here. We're out of here.
Good talking to you guys.
Take care.